Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. We're ready to record now. We used about 45 minutes on
30 minutes talking about Lord of the Rings,
topics.
10
Maybe we
minutes
should just
talking
record
about...
one of these times. So we just as soon as we get on video.
Yeah, that won't make my editing like 1,000 times harder at all. But anyway,
we'll just freelance that thing.
Yeah, we were like, what were all of Gandalf's different names based on what region he was in, and what happened to Merry and Pippin after they left the Shire the second time? But anyway, we are actually here though today to talk about the Packers. It is middle of May, so not a whole lot to talk about, but we are going to continue on our deep
just
dive.
Imagine how much more off topic we can get later.
I know. But we're going to continue today on our deep dives into the Packers draft class, the Packers 2026 draft class. We've already done ones on Cisse, McClellan, and Deni Dennis Sutton last week. So if you want to check those out over the last 3 weeks, rather, go check those out in your feed. Today we are focusing on Jager Burton, center out of Kentucky, the only offensive lineman drafted by the Packers in this class. We'll talk about whether or not we think that's sufficient, whether or not they should have drafted more, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk about that in a little bit. That'll be part of our deep dive. But that'll be today. Not a whole lot of news, but there are a couple things we can touch on as well. And we'll be continuing this deep dive for the rest of the offseason. I think actually next week we're going to probably combine Damani Jackson and Trace Mack just because, only so much you can talk about for a kicker. As much as we can find, we will talk about, but it would be short to just do him. So probably next week we'll combine those two. But we're going to be here with you the entire offseason doing an episode every single week. Next week is OTAs as well, so we'll have some stuff to talk about then for the first... OTAs have already started technically, but we'll have open OTAs to the reporters in practice, so we'll get news on, where is Jager Burton lining up? Is he mostly at center? Is he at guard and center? We'll talk about our thoughts on his versatility coming up. We'll have some news on maybe what the receiver rotation looks like, who's doing some special team snaps, who's returning, who's doing punt returns, who's doing kick returns, what the offensive line looks like we said. How's Jordan Morgan looking at left tackle, which we do have a little bit of news on that in a little bit we'll touch on. But like we said, episode a week for the entire offseason. If you like what you hear, subscribe. That's Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Tell a friend, leave a comment, leave a review. Follow us also on Blue Sky at Father Son Packer for updates on Packers related news and, our thoughts on the ongoings around Lambeau Field. But anyway, once again, that's at Father Son Packer on Blue Sky. I think that does it for the spiel, though. A little bit of a little bit of notes to touch on.
It's a combination of news and notes, I guess.
I guess so. I'm just creating new words. But one roster move, and that was it so far this week. So cornerback Marlon Jones was signed. He's a rookie out of Vanderbilt. And also Eastern Washington before that. Interesting story. If you want to go read about it, I think Packers.com did a nice article on it. I believe I read that. I believe that's where I read it. But anyway, he missed the entire 2024 season while he was fighting cancer, and then came back in 2025 and played at Vanderbilt like 100 snaps or so. But so he's, UDFA. He's probably going to be like one of those like good stories coming out of camp. Hopefully he'll be able to, make a name for himself in camp. But he's going into like a semi-crowded cornerback room, I guess, right now. But you could also say very up for grabs cornerback room right now. So that'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on. But that was the only roster move so far this week. And then the other interesting piece of news came from a guy who I guess maybe we could hope would be on the Packers roster if, he wanted to pack back on about 100 pounds. But Dad, Joe Thomas, I think if he's not already in the Hall of Fame, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. But anyway.
He already is, I think, 23.
Okay.
I was looking it up to see if he already was in.
Hall of Fame left tackle, played for the Browns for many, many years, was at the University of Wisconsin as a Badger before that, was at Packers practice, and he was on Wilde and Tausch, and he had some stuff to say about Jordan Morgan, did he not, Dad?
Yeah, so this was, I think, reported a couple places, but they got the quote from him. Is like, and what he had to say about Morgan was he has exceptional footwork. Overall, I really was impressed with how he moved, the fastidiousness with which he approached his craft. Everything I saw on the field was just impressive with where he placed his hands, Thomas said. Now it was on a bag, granted, but I thought he was just doing a really good job with footwork, that technique, that hand placement, just the focus he was playing with, how quick he was moving, getting to the second level on those combo blocks.
Fastidiousness is a great word. That's that UW education right there. That's a good one.
The funny thing is, if you saw like the computer rendering of what he actually said, it was not fastidiousness. I don't remember what it was, but it didn't make sense. And so I watched the video just to make sure. It's like, oh, okay, now I know what he said.
Yeah, the auto-generated captions. What was I going to say? I think, obviously, you could maybe list 3 or 4 people who have like as high variance that impacts what the Packers are going to look like this year as Jordan Morgan. Like you could argue in terms of maybe biggest question marks. And this is actually an episode I'd like us to do later in the, in the offseason, is like drafting the biggest question marks for the Packers in terms of like, if they're really good, major like positives. If they're really bad, we're in trouble. I think Morgan's got to be high on that list, right?
He might be number one.
I think you could make the
in
argument
terms of how little you know, in terms of unknown, how wide a range it could be.
Yeah, because I mean, left tackle, arguably the second most important position on offense, and first time really like playing significant snaps there. I mean, it's gonna be interesting.
Here's the question: if he looks fantastic, how angry are you about how this last year went?
Well, it's tough.
They really should have done it differently.
It's tough because I think there are valid arguments for like you just get your 5 best guys out there and just see what happens. I think the issue comes with, did you actually have your 5 best guys out there? If he comes in and immediately plays, the problem is, yes, Walker was, I would say, below average last year. Not like, I don't think he was terrible, but he was below average. The issue is he had been good before that. And so it's like,
yeah.
But the thing with Morgan also, though, is he's going out there at left tackle week 1, Minnesota Vikings. That's going to be, he's going to get tested early in terms of like knowing his assignments, knowing like who he's supposed to be picking up on blitzes. And I think, it's after that, it's, Jets, Falcons, and then Tampa loves to throw a lot of blitzes at you too. And it's sort of Jets and Falcons will do some funky stuff as well. But I think that week 1 is going to be an immediate test for Morgan. And it's nice to, it is better to be hearing good things this time of year than bad things. I don't think you can take a whole lot of you can't make sweeping like declarations about either thing either way. But hearing good news right now is better than hearing bad news, I guess.
Absolutely. And often I think, you would hear just crickets. There'd be nothing.
Yeah, that's true. But I guess I never really answered your question. If Morgan was immediately great, I would be like, it's like the Infinity War when Wanda comes down. It's like, why was she up there this whole time? It's like, why was he at guard this whole time when he's really going to tackle? And if that's what happens, and I end up having to be mad about, that's the best case scenario. So I guess true. I wouldn't be that mad.
It's like you wish for it.
That's what I hope. That's what I hope happens.
Yeah.
But anyway, speaking of offensive line, because I do think we both agree that offensive line is probably the position group with the largest number of question marks. Speaking of question marks, do you want to get right into talking about, I would guess we could argue, the biggest offensive line addition this offseason in Jager Burton in the 5th round? Should we start doing our deep dive here, or do you have anything else news-wise, Morgan-wise, Joe Thomas-wise you wanted to touch on?
I haven't heard any other news,
right.
So
it's quiet season. There's not a whole lot going on.
Because I was trying to find out the schedule for the Packers OTAs and mandatory minicamp and the whole off-season schedule, and it kept telling me the same dates everywhere I looked, and all of it was
this
referencing
Wednesday.
back
to
it
already started,
something done a couple months ago, and then I heard, the report's coming from Packers practice.
It's like, we're practicing?
It's supposed to start next week.
Yeah, that's because the open ones to the
yeah. So that's the only dates were for the open ones. It didn't list anything else about what they were doing anywhere.
Yeah, and open to the press, like the press and the media, not to the public. But they did play laser tag last week, which looked fun. So good to see the camaraderie brewing. The other thing is, what was it? The last piece of even news adjacent stuff was, I don't know if you saw the videos of LaFleur shotgunning at the Luke Combs concert with the rest of the team. I mean,
was there a craft?
Well, there's 2 days. It was 2 days. The first day, it was like all the offensive linemen, Morgan, I think Belton was there. I think Banks was there, and a couple other guys were there. And AJ Dillon was there too, actually. And so they all shotgun with Luke Combs one day. And then the next day it was LaFleur, Cooper, Kraft, LVN, Evan Williams, and Josh Jacobs, I think, was the next one. And they all shotgun with Luke Combs as well. And I think, you can say, it doesn't really matter. This is like peak off-season content. I think it's good that the team seems to like each other and that the team seems to like the coach after we got some,
apparently better than last year.
Yeah, after some of the report card stuff from the NFLPA stuff wasn't great. After there was apparently some locker room stuff where people weren't happy with their roles. I think, seeing this stuff is, it doesn't mean everything, but it doesn't mean nothing either. I do think this is generally a good thing that is happening, is that the team is bonding and getting close and doing stuff together and seems to like each other, because I think those intangibles do matter. I mean, like any job, you'd like to be going to work every day with people you like being around, and it's a lot worse when you're not doing that. And it's, I imagine, hard to be at the peak of your field and be number one like in the entire world if you don't like going to work. So
yeah, I think it's positive.
Yeah, it's positive. But anyway, that is like the fact that we're talking about Luke Combs concerts, which that's the news that we're getting in May. But still, I think better. It's not nothing, it's not everything, but it's, I think, moderately good news that they also,
and the fact that they've already had their
doing stuff.
The fact they've already had their team building laser tag might mean that we have one extra day of reports of practice and OTAs.
That's the hope, because apparently usually they're just like, yeah, we're one of your open days, we're not actually practicing. Sorry about that. But anyway, let's start talking about what we're here to talk about, though, which is the Jager Burton deep dive. Talking about the offensive line, I think this will kind of mesh into this nicely. Let's talk about Burton, who 5th round, pick 153, center from Kentucky, or interior offensive lineman, I suppose, but he played center this past year. A little bit about him. He's going to turn 24 on August 24th, so a little bit of an older prospect. He was around 148th on the consensus board. 4-year starter at Kentucky with 5 total years there. He's from Kentucky as well, so kind of stayed home there.
Hometown.
Yeah, stayed in Kentucky the whole time. I think there was some noise about maybe had the chance to, these days most players like tend to move around a good amount. But he stayed in Kentucky, stayed in the SEC the whole time. Something to keep in mind, is from Kentucky. But Dad, what was your initial reaction when this pick was announced?
So he was one of, I just had 5 interior offensive linemen that I was interested in for Green Bay from the point when who I expected to be there, from when they were picking in the 2nd round through the rest of the draft. And the other 4, of those, Slaughter went in the second, Jake Slaughter went in the 2nd round, Trey Zune and Jennings Dunker went in the 3rd, and Jalen Farmer went in the 4th. So of the top 5, he was the only one who was left for interior offensive linemen that I liked for the Packers. So I was very happy to see him get picked. I was hoping he would last, after they got DDS in the 4th, I was hoping that he would last.
Yeah, I was very happy with this pick as well. He was also, like you said, there was a group of offensive linemen that I liked a lot, and he was probably the last of that group in terms of but you also picked him at a spot that was substantially less draft capital investment than any of the rest of those guys, like you were saying. So I think the main highlights for him are his athleticism. He is a freak in terms of, big bodies at the interior offense. It does seem like, when we've talked about this a bunch, Green Bay is going with more bigger guys along the interior. And in terms of bigger guys who can move, in terms of physical profiles, there's not much more you can ask for than what his physical profile looks like. And we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, so my overall takeaway was this was one of the guys in that group of guys that I was happy with. It almost makes up for the fact they didn't take an offensive lineman earlier, because I do think he's going to be a more than serviceable, at the very least, rotational backup lineman, which you need in the modern NFL. You really need to be about 8 deep along the offensive line. And I'm sure at some point during the offseason, we will talk about whether or not this team actually is 8 deep along the offensive line. But in terms of Burton, like I mentioned, physical profile is really impressive. We can talk a little bit about his consistency as actually playing football while he was at Kentucky, and we'll talk about that when we talk about his production profile. But Dad, I was already kind of teasing it. So do you want to take us through his athletic profile? Because I do think it is one of the standout pieces of him as a prospect.
Yeah, so he had elite testing. He has his RAS is 9.88, which means he's a 98.8 percentile athlete at center. And I think he's if you put him at guard, he's also well over 9.
Yeah.
His closest comps on RAS were Elton Jenkins, Ryan Kelly, and Frank Ragnow.
It's not bad company.
That's
not bad company at all.
Rounder.
No.
Yeah, we're just going to get, all-pro center.
Multi-time all-pro center. Yeah, easy peasy. Yeah, of course. No, but anyway, he is physically a freak.
Yeah, so among centers, he's 82nd percentile height at 6'4" and 1/8, 88th percentile weight at 312. So not really bit huge, but I guess
big for a center. Big for a center. Yeah, he'd be probably about slightly above average size for a guard, but a big center.
Shorter arms, 47th percentile arm length at 32.5, but that's actually, we'll go over later what the Packers think of that. 74th percentile hand size at over 10 1/8 inches, 84th percentile wingspan at 80 5/8. He was good at the vert, 61st percentile, and elite in the broad, 94th percentile in the broad at 9 feet 3 inches. elite speed, 98th percentile, 4.94 second 40, 92nd percentile, 2.9 second 20-yard split, and 85th percentile, 1.76 10-yard split. Good strength, 78th percentile in the bench with 28 reps. Great agility. Three cone was good, 75th percentile at 7.64 seconds, but elite 90th percentile short shuttle at 4.52 seconds. It's the third best for all offensive linemen, tackles, centers, guards in this year's draft.
Yeah,
only two that tested better.
And really the short shuttle,
pro day and combine combined.
And really the short shuttle is like the most important of the agility testings for offensive linemen. He didn't hit like quite the magic number that short shuttle is, where it's like if you hit that, you're just like an automatic starter. Yeah.
Nobody did, I think.
But I did also read something where it was like, I think it was the State Journal. I think it was a Kentucky publication that had interviewed his dad, and he was like, oh, he was so mad he didn't run under a 4.9, because I guess that like in prep for the combine, like he had like beat the 4.9 time like a good amount of times and felt like he could do that at the combine, and I guess he was a little mad that he didn't beat that 4.9 40 time. But it just goes to show like he could have apparently tested even more athletic, and obviously all of these guys are going to say that. It's like, oh well, when I was warming up for the combine, I was running a 4.15, and then I just a little slower at the combine. But anyway, I did think that was, and I thought that was an interesting tidbit to throw in.
At center, I thought I'd break the record for 40 time.
Exactly. But it is interesting, like, that he felt he could have gone even faster because he is already a super freak athlete. But how does that athleticism, like you were mentioning, compare to other Packers that we've seen? Just kind of, because sometimes when you hear these numbers, like they can get a little bit nebulous. How does it compare in terms of looking at other offensive linemen Green Bay has had or drafted in the past?
Because one thing to remember about these numbers, these are everybody who's ever tested.
Yeah.
And so it includes people who did never make it to the NFL. But if you look at players, so I like to compare the new pick 10 prospects that I'm thinking about who I like to the players that have been either drafted or played at least 100 snaps while Gutekunst has been the GM to have it as relevant as possible. There have been 20 interior offensive linemen who've either been drafted or played at least 100 snaps under Gutekunst as GM. The average RAS of all of them is like 8.8, I think it was. That's the RAS of the average player, not the average RAS. So I make a theoretical average player, and
based on all their testing, and then
based on all their testing, and then
what the RAS would be of that player.
Punch those numbers in. So sorry, I had to look it up. 8.85 was for that theoretical average player.
That's the funny thing is like even an average like Packers like. We say all the time, Gutekunst loves his athletes. Like the numbers bear out. He really loves the athletes, especially along the offensive line.
Yeah, and so if you compare Burton to all the players, he's right on the average for height, off by like maybe a quarter of an inch or something. Just 2 pounds under the average weight. So this is guards and centers because there aren't that many centers to be a kind of a small sample size, and he might play both positions anyway. He's only a quarter inch under the average arm length. So the Packers' average arm length is lower than what a lot of people think. And it's been one of the ways I think Packers have been able to kind of get better players at their positions of picking.
Mm-hmm.
He's behind only Jenkins, John Williams, and Kennard in wingspan. So he's got the fourth widest wingspan for any other interior offensive lineman.
And Kennard might even be cheating because he's like a guard tackle in some ways, where that one's almost like true. A 50-50.
So I maybe shouldn't have even included him in there. I may actually have him listed both because he did both.
He is both, though. I think it's fair, but I just wanted to put that little tidbit in there. Is like he hits that wingspan thing, but he's also a little bit of a different type of player than those two other guys.
True. He has the best short shuttle time of all of them, beating out Corey Linsley by 0.01 seconds.
And he's like, what, 20 pounds heavier than Corey Linsley? Is also the thing, because Corey Linsley moved great, but he was also a smaller guy. And I don't know if... I think it's a question that, like, to think about is, would the Packers, with Matt LaFleur as coach and Brian Gutekunst right now, would they draft Corey Linsley? Like, if they were in that spot again, is he the type of player they would even draft now?
So when he was coming out, and when he did this testing, he was only 296 pounds.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't even know if he was 300 pounds when he was testing.
Not even 300, so... Yeah, so Burton is 16 pounds heavier.
And we've talked about, would they even draft him? And, we can talk about, like, well, maybe they should
Maybe
think
they
about they should think about the hits they've had at the position.
Maybe they should have stuck with the system they're using.
That's a discussion for another day. But anyway, continue.
He was slightly above average in the 3-cone, so best short shuttle, about average, a little above average in the 3-cone. He had also the best broad jump, so the best short shuttle, the best broad jump, basically right on average in the vert, and right on average in the bench, not by like a half a rep or something.
And the thing is, like, he's an elite athlete, but and the Packers love to draft elite athletes, even compared to the elite athletes that Green Bay has drafted. He like stands out in a lot of different ways, like amongst them.
Yeah, and so even though he didn't break that 4.9 40 time, he still has the best 40 time for any of the Packers' interior offensive linemen under Gutekunst. The second best 20-yard split behind Lucas Patrick.
Good for Lucas Patrick.
So I'm including
and Lucas Patrick. I think you would like definitely consider a successful NFL career. I mean, a 7-8 year NFL career.
Yeah, I think something like
that. Now it feels like he's been around the league for a while, multiple teams. So yeah, I think definitely a successful, a success story in terms of Green Bay offensive linemen recently. But yeah, I mean, like you said, he is one of the not talking about Lucas Patrick anymore. Back to talking about Jager Burton, one of the fastest, one of the most explosive, and one of the most agile athletes the Packers have had along the interior, like in the entire time Gutekunst has been here.
Yeah. His 10-yard split was was a little above average, so that didn't quite get it. Maybe had a bad start.
Doesn't get off the line, quite as fast, but
and that's why he thought he should have done better. I got a bad jump out of the blocks that time. I haven't watched. I watched some people to see like you just get a bad start. It was I can't remember who I was watching. Maybe it was McClellan, and it's like no, he's just slowly building up.
Just takes a little build up time.
Takes a little time to build up, and then was cruising along pretty well at the end.
Yeah, that's McClellan.
Got a bad jump.
McClellan didn't, but I don't know if I think I watched Burton's. I wasn't specifically watching his jump. I don't remember it standing out to me as like him getting a bad start off the line, but he is a super freak athlete. And I think that's probably the main reason that Green Bay was drawn to him. Like when you hear both Gutekunst talk about it, as well as the Packers director of college scouting, Matt Malaspina, both of them talked about, as like big, strong, athletic, like did well at the like all-star game, all the stuff they usually say. But a lot of the highlights of like their profile when the Packers talked about him, when Packers brass talked about him, were his athleticism and his versatility, which to me is like, in some ways, the versatility stuff at least feels like, is this like center, like the offensive line version of McClellan, where it's like they're talking about versatility the whole time, which is like, I think it's a good thing, but I think we're going to talk about in a second how versatile we really think he is. However, though, is there anything else on his athletic profile you want to touch on? So
he played in the Shrine Bowl, so we have some on-field ZebraTech speed measurements. And he did not test as elite. It's kind of similar to Dennis Sutton.
Where the testing on
the testing and the whatever they got on the field that day, or those couple days, was not the same. He was kind of middle of the pack, 46th percentile on-field speed, 53rd percentile max acceleration, 47th percentile max deceleration. So what he did that day was more middle of the pack. And that's, so out of about 148 interior offensive linemen in the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl in the last like 5 years or so.
Yeah, like you said, similar to Dennis Sutton, where it's like the on-field stuff is not as, it doesn't show up as on-field as much as you would like. And maybe that's just about unlocking that a little bit more. But, I think that's something where, you hope the coaching staff is able to, get him to play up to those measurables maybe a little bit more. Yeah. In terms of speaking of which, looking at how he plays on the field, I do think it's interesting that Green Bay talks so much about his versatility, because it is true he has played at a lot of different spots. And I guess, I'll talk a little bit about the Packers quotes really quick, because Gutekunst had this to say. He said, quote, "He fits us because he's so versatile. He can play center. He can play both guard spots. He's a very good athlete. We always try to build that room so that we have different kind of combinations, and certainly he fits that mold," end quote. And so that was a quote from Brian Gutekunst on draft day, on day 3 of the draft. And so a lot of talk about him as a versatile player. And I guess it's interesting because he's a player who really didn't come on the map as like an NFL prospect really until this final year at Kentucky. Because, during his time at Kentucky, he played there 5 years with 37% of his snaps at center, 43% of his snaps at left guard, and 20% of his snaps at right guard. So a decent split, all things considered, between the guard spots and center. He really played center mostly this past year, though. He did not play really anywhere else but center this final year. And he played a little bit of center his third year. And that was like, it was mostly right guard, a little bit of center his third year, went to left guard exclusively in 2024, and then center almost exclusively in 2025. And this past year at center was really when he kind of made a name for himself and put himself on the map as like an NFL prospect. And so I think the question is he really versatile, or has he just played a lot of spots? Is he actually any good at guard? Like, that's, I think, the question, because he did not play particularly well at guard when he was at Kentucky. It wasn't until this final year as a center that he like really looked like he could be something at the next level. And so just because he's played guard, does that mean he can actually play guard in the NFL?
Yeah, we've seen that kind of thing before. It's like, yeah, played those spots. It's not good at him.
He wasn't good at those spots, but he did play in those spots.
Versatility?
Exactly. And so,
but then you get the question here is, was it maturity or was it position?
Did he just get better? Yeah. Or did he just get better his last year and it finally clicked into place? Or was it he's just a center, and which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it would just limit his ability to play like right away in the NFL and just limit his value in the NFL if he was a center only. And so I kind of pulled his
question.
Okay, go ahead.
If he's a center only, but he looks really good,
do you move Ryan to guard?
Do you move Ryan to guard?
I think it just I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think you just have to see how camp rolls out. I would like it to be an open competition for all 5 spots. I mean, more realistically, 4 spots, because Tom is probably right tackle. Although there's always the possibility that Tom is your left tackle, and then we put Morgan at right tackle. But anyway, that's a discussion for another day. That could be an entire episode. I do think I would like to see Burton get the chance to compete for one of those spots initially, because personally, I don't think anyone along the interior offensive line has done enough in the last year. Really the last year, because most of those guys, I mean, Belton and Banks have only been here a year. None of those guys have done enough where they should be like, this is my spot, like no competition. I don't think anyone is at that level, right?
No, I mean, both Banks and Belton were near the bottom of the league.
Yeah, they weren't good last year.
Guards.
And really, Ryan wasn't that good last year either. Like, he was better at center, and he played better than Elton, but that was mostly because Elton was having a really rough year, and Ryan just kind of stabilized it a little bit. But I would like to see a full competition. But anyway, I do think if he is a center only, I wouldn't be opposed to, trying out at least some lineups in camp where he is the center, Ryan is one of the guards, and Belton or Banks is the other guard. That's just something that I wouldn't mind them like taking a look at that. But let's talk a little bit about Burton at center and at guard, because looking at his 2025 numbers where he played at center and looking at his 2024 numbers where he played at guard, there's a stark contrast. And like you said, it's really up to you to decide whether or not you think it finally clicked for him in his last year, or it's, hey, he's not as good at guard as he is at center. But so these numbers are per PFF, and looking in 2025, it's looking at him versus about 187 other centers who had at least 100 snaps. And in 2024, where he mostly played at left guard, it's amongst almost 430 guards who had at least 100 snaps. But I'll give it to you in percentile, so don't worry about the numbers. In 2025, he was 53rd percentile in pressure rate allowed. And in 2024, he was 45th percentile in pressure rate allowed. So he was a little bit better in terms of giving up pressures as at center in 2025 than he was in 2024. In 2025, he gave up 0 sacks and actually did not give up a single quarterback hit, which is impressive. In 2024, he gave up 2 sacks and 1 quarterback hit, which was in the 14th percentile in sack rate. So that's not particularly good. It doesn't sound like a lot of sacks, but also just interior guys don't give up a lot of sacks. So that's it's a little bit noisy, small sample size stuff to give you percentiles, but I'll give it to you either way. So he was better at not giving up sacks and hits at center than he was at guard in 2024. In 2025, he was 79th percentile in penalty rate, so he didn't have nearly as many penalties as he did in 2024, where he was 39th percentile in penalty rate. So also much more buttoned up at center, which you might find a little bit surprising, given that there was probably more mentally on his plate. But hey, that's also maybe a point on the ledger for maybe it was just a little bit of an experience thing. In 2025, he was 76th percentile in PFF run blocking grade, which again, it's not the end-all be-all PFF grades, but they are another data point. He was 76th percentile. In 2024, he was 29th percentile in run block grade at guard. So he was a below-average run blocker at guard. And so I do just think it's interesting to kind of compare those numbers, because I really do think it's a bit in the eye of the beholder if you think he just got better from 2024 to 2025 or if he's just a center. So I don't know. The numbers kind of tell you that he got better when he got to center. So maybe the versatility might be a little bit maybe overemphasized. And maybe it's just that he has the body to play guard as well, but he hasn't played guard as well. And I do think when you watch him, like I was joking about whether or not he was the offensive lineman version of McClellan, I did get similar vibes because I do think when I watch him, he's very much a like stalematey type center where like when guys try and like get through him or get past, he's good at like anchoring and staying, steady, kind of like how McClellan is on defense, where he's good at anchoring and staying steady and not giving up ground. Burton is very good at not giving up ground. He's not as impactful as like a drive, like a blocker that's really moving the line of scrimmage, like resetting the line of scrimmage as an offensive lineman in the run game. Like he's pretty good at climbing to the second level. Now he's not always good at like maintaining at the second level. But so like I said, similar to McClellan, where it's like he's stalemating a lot at the offensive line, which, that's a valuable skill. But I do think like maybe he needs to develop more as a run blocker, and maybe, I don't know. I think the overall production profile tells me kind of in lack of, just to summarize, because I'm giving a lot of numbers here. I think he's better at center than guard. I think I have question marks with him at guard, given that he hasn't really played well at guard. And I think he's a better pass blocker than he is a run blocker. But anyway, I know I just threw a lot of information at you. What are your thoughts on that?
So one thing that occurred to me while you're going through all this, like the Packers also used to say that, well, Josh Myers could play some guard too.
And he never did.
He just never did.
That was clearly when they drafted Josh
really
Myers. When they drafted Josh Myers, they were like, yeah, we think he can play all three interior spots. I don't think he even played a different interior spot in camp one time. Like not for an instant. So yeah, that's a good point. I mean, sometimes versatility is just kind of, it's this kind of loosey-goosey word that just gets thrown around sometimes. And I worry that maybe that's the case for Burton, which would limit his ability to get on the field, because they've also talked about all offseason, oh yeah, Ryan, we really loved what we saw with Ryan once he got to center. Like, and so it's like, okay, so Ryan's going to be the center. Like, and so if Burton can't play guard, there's not a whole lot of avenue to him getting on the field, because they also said stuff about Monk having three position versatility.
I was about to say, and yeah, they shot. I think Gutekunst shouted out how well Monk played in the Vikings game. I think it was at center. But speaking of like avenues to get on the field, like I think Monk is his avenues to get on the field are shrinking.
I mean, he might just be a center. That's the other thing is like it is Monk. I think with over time, I think we've seen he might just be a center. Which there are worse things. Like ideally, you'd be able to play all three spots. But if you can be good at center, like there's still a lot of value there. But anyway, some other interesting notes. He was just the third offensive lineman to win the Paul Hornung Award as the top high school player in Kentucky, and his nickname is Moose. So that's a couple fun little facts about him.
Yes, and despite what you might want to say in Wisconsin elsewhere, it is Jager.
It is Jager, not Jager. Jager would have been fun, but it is Jager Burton. In terms of what scouts had to say about him, Dane Brugler had him as his 9th overall center and 190th overall player. So a little bit lower than where the Packers drafted him, but not terribly, especially because it's all day 3 anyway. But anyway, this is what he had to say. Quote, Burton moved back to center for his senior season and changed the narrative with NFL scouts. Burton is a good-looking athlete for his size with foot quickness as a pass blocker and range in the run game. However, he isn't a true mauler who plays up to his size or knocks defenders back on contact. The biggest wildcard for his NFL transition is the consistency of his confidence and calls/adjustments. Burton needs to continue developing his sustained skills and the mental aspects of the position, but he is a quick win blocker with position flexibility across the interior. He offers intriguing value for zone-based schemes on day 3, end quote. And then Zierlein had to say, quote, durable fifth-year senior who has made 47 consecutive starts. And that's something I actually did forget to mention. Durability is a key factor for him. He was always out there for Kentucky. But anyway, quote, durable fifth-year senior who has made 47 consecutive starts. Burton is built to play center, but could offer swing potential at guard. He has adequate play strength and good quickness for a zone blocking scheme. He gets beaten to first contact by length and will struggle to put up a sustained fight against two gappers at the point. He can slow a bull rush, but needs to do a better job of protecting his edges and operating with consistent posture. Burton's best fit will be with a zone-heavy running game as a late draft pick or undrafted free agent signee, end quote. Any thoughts on, what Brugler or Zierlein had to say?
I think some of it, matches what, we've been talking about in terms of not a mauler, not driving people back.
Yeah. Matches with the numbers in a lot of ways as well. More of a pass protection is more of his strength than run blocking.
Right. And
although they were saying, he doesn't move people, but he can get to spots. Like, he is quite mobile as an interior guy. So it'd be interesting to see what Green Bay could do with him in the run game in terms of pulling him and stuff like that. I think that could be a skill for him.
Yeah. And it's good to see that the scouts feel like his foot quickness is showing up on tape.
Yes. And like we were saying, like Brugler said, like, he really didn't put himself on the map until this last year. And so
it's when he got to center.
Exactly. When he got to center, when he got a little more experience, and also, there's arguments like, hey, he's almost a grown man at that point. Like, when you're 23 years old playing against guys who are probably 20, there is some advantage there with, some experience. So only time will tell if he just something clicked, or if it was the move to center, or if he was just beating up on guys who were smaller than him. In terms of what Packers people had to say, I already read you the Gutekunst quote, but Matt Malaspina, Packers director of college scouting, and this is per Packers Wire, quote, very excited to have him, very excited about his future and what he's going to be for this team. Started at guard there, started at center, fifth-year player, so he went through the process to develop. Big, strong, athletic, smart, tough, check, everything you're looking for, end quote. And so, the Packers seem very excited to have him. There does seem to be a lot in his profile in terms of might have versatility. I think maybe more of a question mark than it's getting credit for, but might have versatility. Has, everyone that talks about him in terms of like the Kentucky coaching staff, like scouts, everyone talks about him as like a very intelligent player. And so that should help him translate to center at the NFL level. And then also just freak athlete, which I think is probably the 1A. Like, if you were writing the first thing on his scouting report in terms of pluses, I think 1A is like super freaky athlete in terms of testing.
Yeah. And he just seems like kind of a Packersy pick.
Yes. And that's another take I saw a lot was like, oh yeah, the Packers would take Burton. Like, that's a very Packers pick, which, like, yeah, I'm fine with someone saying Packers O-line pick is a Packers pick, because that has worked out for us in the past. Maybe not as much recently, but in the past it has.
Yes. And so the Packersiness of it is really the way they used to do things until the last couple of years.
Although
hasn't established as much of a pattern yet.
But he's not a tackle guard convert like a lot of.
No, this is true. A lot of times they pick a tackle. Though if he's a center, they've gone for centers.
That is true. Now, I guess this kind of leaves us into maybe talking a little bit about the offensive line room as a whole and how we think it's going to shake out. Because right now, I don't think the 5 starters are set in stone, but I think the 5 main guys have a large lead. They have a large lead on the field, with that being left to right, Morgan, Banks, Ryan, Belton, Tom. If you had to say one guy has the least firm grip on his job, it's probably Belton, right?
Probably Belton. I mean, he's only played 1 year, so he's not well established. He's only played a little bit of guard, and he did not look great. So he's got to.
He had flashes. But overall was not
what
great.
He could do by getting a year of actual practicing at guard before being thrown out into the field.
It's still so dumb. They'll rep anyone at every spot except for the guys who actually need to play at that spot.
So the question is, I think those guys are pretty set unless somebody else looks really good. And I would say that Kennard has the
he has the leg up in the
upper
sixth
hand,
spot.
leg up on being the swing tackle.
Yes, / swing guard, because they played him at guard too a little bit.
They could, but I would say there's room for somebody to step up and be the top swing interior offensive lineman.
Yeah, and so I was going to say transitioning the offensive line talk to specifically Burton. I think right around that 7 spot, maybe that 6 spot, maybe even that like Belton spot is where we could hope that Burton slides in. Because like you were saying, is there a chance if Burton is a center only and looks good, is there a chance they move Ryan to guard? And I think if that happened, I would assume it would be Banks at left guard, Burton at center, Ryan at right guard. And we hear them talk all the time
unless Belton looks amazing.
Unless Belton looks amazing, or unless, injuries always happen. What if one of the tackles goes out and, Belton has to play tackle? Like, he's probably Belton is the next guy up at tackle in terms of who they'd like to have play there. I mean, maybe it's Kennard, but I think if it happened early enough in the offseason, like obviously, hopefully it doesn't. Like, they might just be like, okay, Belton, you're the starting tackle for the season now. Like, sorry, we told you were going to play guard, but the things have changed. And then, Burton, I would imagine, would probably get a shot to take that guard spot or take the center spot and move Ryan to guard.
Spot.
That's the thing, though, is taking the center spot. I guess let's talk about that just for a second as we ramble, because we're in bit in ramble mode, but that's okay. It's my favorite time of the day. I was going to say, I don't think they're going to move Ryan off center, even if it is to get the 5 best guys on the field. That's my hot take. I don't think they would do that, because I think they talked about during this, immediately after the season ended, and when they signed Ryan, we thought he looked so much better once he moved to center. And I think there's something to be said for having. It's true. The numbers bear it out as well. But I do also think there's something to be said for having a bit of consistency there for Jordan Love, having a center that he has experience with and not having a rookie center. I do think there's like an added bonus there where even if Burton might, give you something a little bit extra, I think that the intangibles and knowledge of the scheme and knowledge of the offense that Ryan would bring, having, been in the system for a good long while now, for 4 years, I don't think that's nothing.
Yeah, I think a lot of the narrative for Ryan in the offseason is that there's optimism for his play at
when
center.
He can focus at center.
Because he was better at center than he was at guard. So
yes.
Moving him back to guard, and you dampen that optimism a little bit.
And then to put a rookie in at center, that's why it's like that feels like, and that's why it feels like, hey, if Jager's a center only, that might be an issue with getting him on the field anytime soon, right?
It's possible, yeah. If they feel like, well, Ryan was, and part of it is not just that he was better than himself, at center versus himself at guard, but also better than Jenkins was at center.
Yes. He was like a very workable center. I wouldn't say like heavily above average, but he was
in the top.
He was a perfectly solid and acceptable center. And that's like, a solid and acceptable offensive lineman is not cheap. Like that those are valuable. Like there are not enough of those to go around. Like even just serviceable offensive linemen, there are not enough of those. So that's valuable, even if it maybe doesn't sound valuable when we're saying it out loud. And so to bring it back, I think if Burton's going to get on the field, it does feel like he's probably going to have to beat out Belton for a spot or be ready to be the backup guard, and just prove that,
be able to fill in
and prove spots. That when he was playing at guard in 2024, he just wasn't the player that he is now, and that he's just a better football player now, and he can play guard better than he did then. Because I think if he plays guard like he did in 2024, that's not an NFL player, right?
Yeah. It's just not. That's not the standard.
It's not the standard. Yeah,
I think he's competing with Glover, Williams, and Jennings.
Yeah,
probably it could be Monk.
Probably the group. Maybe Monk, although Monk might also be a center only. Maybe Kennard. Kennard plays. He fills in at guard sometimes. So, I think ideally, let's talk ceiling floor, and then we'll get out of here. In terms of first year. Ceiling first year, he wins the right guard spot in camp and beats out Belton.
Yeah, that's the real ceiling. That's the ceiling. That's high ceiling.
Right? That's the ceiling for first year is he wins the right guard spot.
He's better than,
and looks good.
Better than Belton.
Yeah. I think floor is he's like lineman 8. Or he's fighting Monk for that spot.
I was going to say, if he's the floor might be below Monk, which isn't.
I don't know if the floor is
lineman 8.
I don't know if the floor is below Monk. I think the floor is fighting it out with Monk, and I do think that is lineman 8, which I don't think it should be, but I think is a testament to how precarious the depth is right now on this offensive line.
I think that's more like lineman 9 or 10.
So you have Jennings ahead of Monk, because I don't. Jennings has never looked as good as Monk has looked.
Glover's ahead of. Yeah.
Sure, I think Kennard is. I think Glover is.
You got Kennard, Glover.
And then who?
Williams is a total wild card.
Complete unknown. I'm not going to give you that one.
He's basically a draft pick this year.
Yes, but he was a 7th rounder and Burton was a 5th rounder. So I think
that has favors Burton in that.
Yeah. True. So that's why I think it's he's floor is fighting for that 9 spot, where he's kind of battling out for that next man up.
That 8-9 spot.
Yeah. But so that's kind of how I feel like it. And I think worst case scenario, he's a center only, and then it's oh shoot, where do we play this guy? And then best case scenario, he's your starting right guard, and he looks great, and it looks like his last year at Kentucky.
Yes, if he looks really good, but he's a center only. Then
that's
move on from Ryan after 1 year.
I think
at center.
I think that's a fair, like that's a question to have, is if he looks really good and he's a center only, then what? Because that's like what do you do? But I do think that opens some maybe, Pandora's box of like questions like, well, do you move on from Ryan? But also like, can you afford to just move on from like, because Ryan wasn't good at guard, but like he's a decent offensive lineman. You just don't have many.
Yeah.
Like
they would move off of him right away, but maybe after just 1 year on this current contract,
or maybe Ryan
just a 2-year deal.
Maybe Ryan just becomes the swing backup offensive lineman, and you're just like, hey, we're paying him a good chunk of money, but also offensive linemen aren't cheap, and he's better than any other guy we could get. But I think those are questions and interesting questions for another time. But anyway, any final thoughts on the offensive line situation and Jager Burton's place in it?
Oh, the whole thing? I think the offensive line is going to be better next year than it was last year.
I hope you're right. I'm not going to believe it till I see it. I think there are reasons for optimism. I think there are reasons for because
trepidation.
My trepidation. I have trepidation about the starting lineup, which I think there are a lot of good arguments though as to why it could be better. I don't see many arguments as to why the depth is going to be better. I think the depth should be scary for everyone, because there's a lot of unproven guys next up in the wings. And guys like Burton and guys like Travis Glover and guys like Kennard are going to have to be ready. And hopefully Burton is able to add to that group and, be ready when his number is called upon. But anyway, this has been the Father Son Packers podcast. This has been our deep dive into Jager Burton, and also a good chunk of offensive line talk since it kind of, merited it. If you like what you heard, subscribe, whether that's Apple, Spotify, YouTube. We've done deep dives into Cisse, McClellan, and Dennis Sutton already so far, so if you want to go check those out, they're back in your feed. We will be talking about Damani Jackson and Trey Smack next week, so, keep the dial tuned there, as well as, talking about any news we get from OTAs, so hopefully we get something to talk about, but hopefully not anything too exciting to talk about. But anyway, thank you again for listening. Follow us on Blue Sky at Father Son Packer, and until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.